The Jungle Moon. Mira 7 was not quiet. The wind moved through the strange trees and made them sing low notes. The ground was soft with moss. Bright flowers glowed near the roots of tall purple trunks. Insects with golden wings buzzed above the leaves. Everything looked alive and full of color. A young man named Rill walked carefully through the forest. He wore a dark scout suit with a small pack on his back. His boots made no sound on the soft earth. In one hand, he held a scanner that blinked with small green lights. He was here alone, sent by the Earth Exploration Group to collect plant samples and map the area. It was part of his job, but he liked being alone in places like this. The world felt honest when no one else was around. Rill moved slowly past a line of glowing bushes. His scanner made a soft beep and showed a sign of strange movement nearby. He stopped. There was something not right. The air felt thick, like it was holding its breath. Then he heard it, a sound that did not belong to the jungle. It was small, almost like a whisper, but not from the wind. It came from deeper between the trees. Rill stood still. The sound came again. It was a soft cry, weak and full of pain. Someone or something was calling for help. Rill walked toward the sound. He did not run. Fast steps in a forest like this could wake things better left asleep. As he moved forward, the trees grew taller and long vines hung down like ropes. Some of them moved slightly, even though there was no wind. He kept his hand close to his tool blade, just in case. Then he saw her. Hanging above the ground between two wide tree trunks was a girl, not a human girl. She had long white fur, tall ears that bent slightly at the tips, and large violet eyes, filled with fear. Her body was wrapped tightly by thick green vines that pulsed like they had their own heartbeat. She did not speak, but her eyes followed Rill as he stepped closer. She was caught in the air, arms pulled to the sides, legs tied together. The vines covered her mouth so she could not call out clearly. Rill looked at the vines. They were not normal. They were alive, moving slowly like snakes. They had no thorns, but they held her tightly. Rill took a careful breath. He spoke softly. "I'm not going to hurt you. I'll try to help you." The girl blinked slowly. Her ears twitched. She looked very tired. Rill stepped closer and pulled his tool blade from his side. It was a short, flat device used for cutting thick plant material. He held it up and showed her, then pointed to the vines. "I'm going to cut these. Hold still." She nodded as much as she could. He started with the vine near her left arm. As the blade touched it, the vine moved fast, trying to pull back, but Rill followed it with the blade and made a clean slice. The vine let out a high, sharp sound, like steam escaping a pipe. A puff of green mist came from the cut, and Rill stepped back quickly, covering his nose. His eyes watered, but he stayed focused. The vine loosened on her arm. He moved to the next one, near her waist. Each cut was met with the same reaction, a sharp noise and a cloud of mist. But Rill worked quickly. The girl didn't move. She just watched him with her wide, tired eyes. When he reached the final vine around her legs, it was the thickest. He pressed the blade hard. It took a moment, but the vine gave way. As it snapped, the girl fell forward. Rill caught her before. She hit the ground. She was light, and her fur felt warm against his arm. She tried to speak, but only a soft sound came out. Rill placed her gently on the ground and pulled a small bottle of water from his belt. "Here, drink slowly." She drank carefully, her eyes never leaving his face. Now that she was free, Rill could see she was not just some wild creature. She wore a cloth-like wrap across her shoulders made from woven plant fibers. Her hands had fingers like his, but each finger ended in a soft pad instead of a nail. Her feet looked built for fast running. She was not from Earth, but she was not dangerous. The vines above them twitched. Rill looked up. They were pulling back now, slipping into the tree branches like they had never been there. Whatever force had controlled them was gone, or asleep. Again. Rill looked back at the girl. She was sitting up now, holding the water bottle in both hands. Her breathing was slow and deep. "My name is Rill," he said. The girl touched her throat, then drew a symbol in the air. It glowed for a second, 3 curved lines and a small star shape. Rill had never seen a symbol like that. He smiled a little. "We'll figure out how to talk later. Let's get out of this place first." The girl nodded. She tried to stand, but her legs shook. Rill offered his hand. She took it, carefully. Together, they began walking through the trees, away from the vines and deeper into the unknown forest. The sun above Mira 7 shone through the leaves in soft colors, blue and gold and pink. Strange birds flew high above. Somewhere behind them, the vines curled back into the branches, quiet again, but something had changed. Something had awakened, and Rill knew this was only the beginning. Rill helped the rabbit girl walk slowly through the forest. Her steps were soft and light, but she still looked tired. The vines had taken much of her energy. She held on to Rill's arm for balance, her tall ears twitching with every strange sound. The forest around them stayed quiet. Too quiet. The vines had pulled back, but Rill felt like they were still watching. The air was thick and heavy, and the light that came through the trees had turned pale green. Every now and then, the ground moved, just a little under their feet, like something large was breathing below. "We need shelter," Rill said gently. "Somewhere safe for you to rest." The girl didn't answer. She just nodded slowly. Rill checked his scanner. A small signal blinked to the left. He had built a scan shelter earlier that day near a water source. It was not far from here. He guided the girl in that direction, moving through hanging moss and glowing mushrooms. After 10 minutes of walking, they reached a small clearing. In the middle was a round pod made of light metal and clear glass panels. It looked like a tiny hut half hidden by thick leaves. Rill pressed a button on his wrist, and the shelter door opened with a soft sound. He helped the girl inside. The shelter was simple: 1 seat, 1 resting pad, and a small table with tools. The air inside was dry and cool. It felt like a different world compared to the wild forest outside. The girl sat on the soft pad and looked around. Her eyes followed the lights on the wall. She touched a panel gently with one hand. Rill smiled. "You're safe here," he said. "No vines, no danger." He pulled out a small scanner and held it near her arm. The screen showed her body temperature and heartbeat. Both were low but not dangerous. Her skin had tiny scratches, where the vines had wrapped around her, but nothing serious. He gave her a small healing patch and placed it gently on her shoulder. She looked at him with soft eyes, then placed her hand on her chest and gave a small bow. Rill sat across from her. "Do you understand me?" The girl raised her hand and slowly drew a circle in the air. It glowed for a moment, then faded. Rill frowned a little. "Is that your way of speaking?" She nodded. Then she touched her throat and shook her head. She tried to speak, but only a soft sound came out. Her voice was still weak. She pointed to her mouth and then to the vines in her memory. "The vines took your voice," Rill guessed. She nodded again. Rill leaned back and sighed. "I wish I knew more about your kind." The girl looked around, searching. Then she saw a tool on the table and picked it up. It was a stylus used to write on digital screens. She looked at Rill, and he handed her a small screen pad. She began to draw simple shapes, stars, trees, and symbols. Rill watched her carefully. She pointed to one drawing of a tall tree with many vines. Then she drew herself near the tree. After that, she drew a satellite above it. The signal came from the sky. "You followed a signal," Rill said, "and it led you into the forest." She nodded quickly. Then the vines caught you. Another nod. Rill looked at the pad. Were you alone? She drew a small circle with another figure beside her, but then she scratched it out. Her eyes grew sad. She had lost someone. Maybe a friend. Maybe her guide. Rill placed a hand on his chest. You don't need to be afraid. I'll help you. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she reached into a small pouch tied to her side. From it, she pulled out a glowing stone the size of a berry. She placed it in Rill's hand. It felt warm and pulsed softly like a heartbeat. What is this? He asked. She made a motion with her fingers, like spreading light. Then she pointed to Rill. He didn't fully understand, but he nodded. I'll keep it safe. Suddenly, the lights in the shelter flickered. The scanner on the wall beeped twice. Rill turned quickly. The outside camera showed movement near the trees. The vines had returned. Not many, but a few had come close to the shelter. They're not finished, Rill said quietly. They know you're here. The girl stood slowly and moved beside him. She looked at the screen and her ears dropped. She was afraid. Rill pressed a button to activate a mild electric barrier around the shelter. It wouldn't hurt the vines, but it would keep them away for now. A soft blue field appeared around the dome. The vines stopped at the edge. They didn't move closer, but they didn't leave either. They just waited. Rill turned to the girl. They're not normal plants. They react like animals, maybe more. Do they think? Feel? She looked unsure. Then she pointed to her head and made a circling motion. Then to her heart. They remember, Rill guessed. They feel what happened to them. She nodded. Rill looked outside again. Then cutting you free made them angry. The girl reached out and touched his hand. She didn't look angry. She looked thankful. Rill gave a small smile. Well, if they want a reason to stay angry, they can. I'm not giving you back. Outside, the vines slowly slipped away into the shadows. The shelter stayed quiet. Inside, the girl sat again and leaned back. Her eyes started to close. Her body was tired, but she looked calm now. Rill dimmed the lights and sat by the wall, keeping watch. As sleep came to both of them, the jungle outside whispered in low sounds, but the shelter was strong, and for tonight, it was enough. Something strange was happening on this moon. The vines were alive in a way no human had seen before, and the rabbit girl with violet eyes was part of a story far bigger than Rill had expected. The sun of Mira 7 rose slowly over the forest. Its light turned the sky soft orange and gold. Trees stretched their wide leaves toward the sky. The vines had pulled back into the branches, but their presence was still felt. They were quiet, but they were not gone. Inside the small shelter, the air was calm. The blue light of the barrier outside still glowed. It had kept the vines away during the night. A soft hum came from the power core in the floor. Rill woke up first. He had not slept much. He had kept one hand near his tool blade and one eye half open. Now, as the morning light filled the shelter, he looked over at the girl. She was still asleep. Her chest rose and fell slowly. Her white fur looked soft in the light, and her ears twitched a little, even in sleep. She held the small, glowing stone in her hand close to her chest. Rill watched her for a moment. She looked peaceful now, but he could still see the pain in her face. He stood and walked over to the table. He checked his scanner. The forest was still active. The vines had returned to the outer trees, but had not come close again. Rill didn't trust them. Not yet. He made a small breakfast pack and heated it. The scent of warm berries and grain filled the air. The smell woke the girl. She sat up slowly and blinked. For a moment she looked unsure of where she was. Then she saw Rill and relaxed. Morning, Rill said softly. I made food. Not much, but safe to eat. He handed her a small piece of fruit bread and a pouch of water. She took it gently and nodded in thanks. They ate in silence. The forest outside sang with the calls of flying creatures and the rustle of leaves. After they finished, the girl picked up the writing pad again. She drew quickly and showed it to Ryle. It was a picture of the tree from before, the one with the vines. But this time, there was something glowing inside it, a round shape, like a heart. Rill frowned a little. "There's something inside the tree?" She nodded. Then she pointed to herself. "Then to the tree. You were looking for it?" She nodded again. Rill thought for a moment. "Is it something your people lost?" She looked down, then slowly drew a symbol beside the tree. It was the same mark she had drawn in the air when they first met. 3 curved lines and a star. He remembered. It was her name, or maybe her people's name. He still wasn't sure. He pointed to it. "That's you?" She tapped it once, then touched her chest. "Nari," Rill said, trying the sound. "Is that your name?" She gave a small smile and nodded. "All right." "Nari. I'm Rill." He pointed to himself. She repeated the name slowly. Rill nodded with a smile. "Now we understand each other a little better." Nari walked to the window and looked outside. Her ears twitched again. The vines were still far away, hiding in the thick branches. She placed her hand on the glass. Her face was calm, but her eyes showed something deeper. Worry, memory, maybe sadness. Rill stood beside her. "You want to go back to the tree, don't you?" She nodded without turning. "Even after what happened?" She nodded again. Rill crossed his arms. "Why?" Nari picked up the pad and drew again. This time she drew many small figures that looked like her. They stood near a large light, shaped like a star. Then she drew lines connecting them to the heart inside the tree. "They were connected to it," Rill said quietly. She tapped the heart. Then she drew a small broken mark over it. "It's damaged," she pointed to herself again. "You can fix it?" She shook her head slowly. Then she pointed to Rill. "Me?" She nodded. Rill looked confused. "But I don't know anything about your tech. I'm just a scout." She pointed to the glowing stone in his hand. "This?" She nodded. Then she touched her chest, then his. She drew a line between them on the pad. 2 points, 1 path. Rill looked down at the stone. It was still warm. It pulsed gently. He took a deep breath. "All right. We go back." Nari's eyes lit up. She gave a small bow of thanks. "But we move carefully," Ryle added. "The vines won't be happy to see us again." She nodded. Rill packed his gear. He gave Nari a small energy cloth to wear over her shoulders for warmth. She tied it neatly and followed him out. The forest was still full of sound. Small animals moved in the trees. Bright flowers opened to the sun, but the vines were quiet, watching. Rill used his scanner to mark their path. Nari moved beside him, light on her feet. She knew how to walk without making sound. She showed him how to step around the moss that made crackling noise, how to pass under branches without waking the fluttering creatures. As they walked, Rill felt something different. The forest didn't seem angry now. It seemed curious. After 2 hours, they reached a ridge. From there, they could see the tall tree again. It stood in the middle of a wide field, its roots thick like walls, and vines hanging from every branch. The light inside it pulsed slowly, like a sleeping heart. Nari stared at it for a long time. Rill watched her. "This is where it started, isn't it?" She nodded. The sky above the tree was clear. No birds flew near it. No animals walked close. The air around it shimmered faintly. Rill looked at the glowing stone again. "Let's find out why I'm part of this." They moved down the ridge, stepping carefully. The vines below waited. Ril and Nari stood at the edge of the field. The tree in front of them was the largest Ril had ever seen. Its bark was thick and dark, with green lines running through it like veins. The vines that had once trapped Nari hung from every branch, still and silent. The soft light at the center of the tree glowed, like a quiet flame. Nari pointed to the base of the tree. There was a wide opening shaped like a circle. It pulsed with the same glow as the stone Ril carried in his pouch. "Is this the entrance?" Ril asked. Nari nodded. Her face looked calm, but her hands were tight at her sides. She remembered what had happened the last time she walked near this place. Ril looked around the field. No creatures moved. No sounds came from the trees. It felt like the forest was holding its breath again. He stepped forward slowly. The ground was soft, but not wet. Strange plants bent away from his feet. Nari followed close behind him. As they walked across the field, the vines above them began to stir. They didn't fall or strike. They simply shifted. It was like they were watching. Ril stopped at the entrance. He took the glowing stone from his pouch and held it up. The light inside the tree grew brighter. The vines above went still again. "They know we're here," Ril said. Nari nodded and stepped beside him. She touched the edge of the tree and closed her eyes. Her long ears drooped slightly. The bark under her fingers glowed faintly. She opened her eyes and looked at Ril. Together they walked inside. The inside of the tree was wide and open. A soft green light filled the space. The walls were smooth and warm. Small vines hung from above but didn't touch them. In the center of the room was a round platform with markings carved into it. Ril stepped closer and looked at the shapes. They were like the ones Nari had drawn in the air, symbols, language, memory. Nari walked to the platform and placed her hand on the center. A soft hum filled the space. The markings began to glow. The room lit up with soft blue lines that rose into the air. They formed images, moving slowly. Ril saw pictures of Nari's people, tall, rabbit-like beings, full of life and light. They stood together around the tree, their hands lifted to the sky. Then the images changed. The vines began to move wildly. The tree pulsed too fast. The lights became sharp. The people began to fall. The connection was broken. Ril watched in silence. He felt a strange ache in his chest. It wasn't just a story. This was a memory. A message. Nari touched the center again, and the images faded. "What happened?" Ril asked. She picked up the writing pad and drew quickly. She showed him a symbol of the tree, with light flowing from it to the sky. Then she drew a broken shape through the middle. "It was sending something," Ril said. "And then it broke." She nodded. Then she pointed to the stone in his hand. "This can fix it?" Nari hesitated, then nodded again. But her eyes showed doubt. "Why me?" Ril asked. She drew a figure that looked like him, then drew a star over his chest. She pointed to the glowing lines in the tree. Then she pointed to him again. He looked down at the stone. "This connects to the tree somehow, and now I do too." Nari nodded. Ril stepped onto the platform. The floor lit up under his feet. The stone in his hand pulsed faster. He felt a soft warmth moving through him. Not painful, just strange. Like the tree was speaking, but not with words. He held out the stone. The light from it connected with the lines on the floor. The room glowed brighter. The vines above stirred again. Then the glow stopped. The room fell quiet. The light dimmed. The lines on the floor faded. Ril stepped back. Did it work? Nari looked confused. She stepped onto the platform and touched the center again. Nothing happened. Ril frowned. "Maybe I'm not enough." She shook her head and pointed to both of them. Then she drew the same two-point connection again. "We need to do it together?" She nodded. Ril stepped beside her. She held his hand, and they both placed the stone in the center of the platform. A new light filled the room. This one was golden. It rose from the floor to the top of the tree. The vines didn't move. They stood still, as if listening. Images appeared again. This time, they showed both humans and Nari's people, working together, sharing tools, sharing knowledge, standing under the tree, not in fear, but in peace. The tree pulsed gently. The stone in the center broke into tiny lights and floated into the air. Nari looked at Ril and smiled. The tree had accepted them. Outside, the forest changed. The vines hanging from the branches uncurled and relaxed. The glow around the field spread wider. Birds returned to the sky. Small animals peeked out from behind roots. Ril and Nari stepped out of the tree. The light behind them stayed warm and calm. "You didn't just need someone to cut you free," Ril said. "You needed someone to listen." Nari nodded. The wind moved through the leaves above them, not with warning, but with peace. The forest was no longer holding its breath. The forest of Mira 7 had changed. Where once the vines were wild and silent, now they moved slowly with the wind. The leaves above whispered gently, and the strange glowing flowers opened wider. The light from the giant tree behind Ril and Nari still shone, but now it was soft and golden. Ril looked around the clearing. He had never seen a place so quiet, so calm. The tree had accepted them. The memory of Nari's people had returned to its heart. For a long time, no one had listened. Now it had heard. But there was more. Nari stood beside him, her long ears gently lifted as she listened to the sounds of the jungle. Her eyes stayed on the trees ahead, not behind. She pointed toward a path that led deeper into the forest. The scanner on Ril's wrist beeped quietly. A strange signal was coming from that direction. "You want to go further?" Ril asked. Nari nodded. She tapped the pad and drew a shape, a circle with a light inside it. Then she drew a second one, smaller, far from the first. "A second core?" Ril asked. She nodded. "You knew this from the beginning?" She gave a slow nod and looked down for a moment. She had not told him everything, but now she was ready. Ril gave a small smile. "Then let's go." They packed a small kit and left the large tree behind. The vines moved gently above them, but no longer reached down. The path ahead was covered in soft moss and small glowing stones. As they walked, the light changed. It turned deeper, more golden. The air was warm but not heavy. Nari walked ahead now. Her steps were fast and sure. She knew this part of the forest. Ril followed closely. He trusted her. After some time, they reached a narrow passage between two tall rocks. Vines hung like curtains over the gap. Nari stepped forward and touched one. It moved aside for her. "They know you," Ril said. She looked back and nodded. "Once?" They passed through the rocks and entered a new part of the jungle. This one was older. The trees were taller and their roots twisted like sculptures. The ground was dry and the light above was dim. Strange blue leaves grew from cracks in the trees. The sound of water came from somewhere far ahead. As they moved deeper, the scanner beeped again. Ril looked at it. "The signal is stronger now. It's not just energy. There's a pattern, a message." Nari tilted her head. She listened. Her ears turned with each small sound. Then she pointed ahead. They reached a wide pool of still water. In the center stood a large stone structure, half covered in vines and moss. It looked like a tower, but broken and old. The signal came from there. "There it is," Ril said. They walked around the pool, stepping carefully. The ground was uneven but not dangerous. When they reached the base of the tower, Nari stepped forward and pressed her hand against a stone panel. It glowed. A soft tone filled the air, low and calm. The vines on the tower shifted, pulling back. A door opened, leading into the heart of the structure. Inside, the air was cool. The walls were smooth, with long lines of light running along them. Reel touched one. It felt warm. "This was not made by your people, was it?" he asked. Nari shook her head. Then she pointed to the symbols on the wall. They were different. Older, Reel looked closely. He saw circles, stars, and lines crossing like paths. A language, but one he did not know. They followed the lighted path inside. It led to a small room in the center. In the middle of the floor, a crystal device floated above a round base. It spun slowly and glowed blue. Reel stepped closer. The scanner in his hand lit up. "This is the source. The signal is coming from here." He held the scanner near it. The device responded. Light lines spread across the room. The walls lit up with new images. Reel saw stars, planets, and strange ships. He saw Nari's world. Then he saw Earth. Nari stepped beside him, her eyes wide. "This is a map," Reel said. "A star map, and it knows about both our worlds." The lights moved again. This time they showed a door, one that connected two places, a gate, maybe, or a portal. Then the image changed to show vines wrapping around it, blocking it. Reel looked at Nari. "This place was meant to connect our worlds." She looked surprised. "It's not just a signal, it's a bridge." But it was shut down when the vines lost control. Nari touched the base of the device. Her hand glowed faintly. The room grew quiet. A small voice spoke from the scanner. Not loud, not clear, but real. It said one word: unity. Reel looked at the device. "It's calling out again." He held out his hand. Nari took it. Together, they placed their hands on the device. Light burst from the base and filled the room. It was not blinding. It was warm, soft, like the tree's light, but stronger. The vines outside began to move again, but not in anger. They moved like they were waking up from a long dream. Reel felt a connection form inside his mind. Not words, but feelings, peace, curiosity, memory. The jungle was alive, and it was listening. Nari looked at him and smiled. She placed her other hand on the center of his chest. "You brought this back," Reel said quietly. "But it listened to me because I'm different." She nodded. The light faded. The device returned to its soft glow. Outside, the jungle had changed once more. The colors were brighter. The air was lighter. Something had opened again, not just in the forest, but between their two worlds. Reel and Nari stood at the top of the tower and looked out across the trees. The journey was not over, but the message had been heard. Reel and Nari stood at the top of the ancient tower. The jungle stretched out before them, alive and glowing softly under the golden light. The device inside had awakened something powerful. It hummed quietly now, like a heartbeat. The soft breeze moved through Nari's fur. Her ears twitched as she listened to the sounds of the jungle below. Birds sang again, and small creatures moved among the roots. The vines that once trapped her and the tree were calm now, as if they understood something new. Reel looked at the glowing stone in his hand. It pulsed gently, matching the rhythm of the device. It was like the two were connected by an invisible thread. He looked at Nari and smiled. "Looks like we woke up the jungle," he said. Nari smiled back. "Yes, it feels alive again, like it is ready." Reel nodded. "Ready for what?" Nari looked toward the horizon. "The gate." Reel frowned. "The gate?" She nodded. "The portal between worlds, the one in the star map." Reel turned his eyes to the sky. The stars were bright and clear. Somewhere out there was Earth, and here was Mira 7. Two worlds, connected by something ancient. "We need to find it," Reel said. "Before others come," Nari agreed. Together they began their journey down from the tower. The vines gently parted as they passed. The forest seemed to guide them now. As they walked, Reel felt the weight of the glowing stone. It pulsed stronger when they got closer to the heart of the jungle. The path led them through tall trees and glowing flowers. The light above changed, colors like a slow dance of greens and blues. Suddenly, Nari stopped. Her ears flattened slightly. She held up a hand. Reel froze. From behind a tree, a group of figures stepped forward. They wore dark clothes and strange helmets. Their eyes were covered by glowing visors. Reel reached for his tool blade, but Nari shook her head. The figures spoke in a strange language. Their voices were low and mechanical. One of them stepped forward and pointed at Nari. The others looked at Reel. Reel felt a chill. They were not from this jungle. They were hunters. Nari stepped in front of him. She raised her hand, and the glowing stone shone brightly. The vines behind them shifted, wrapping gently around the hunters, but without hurting them. It was a warning. The leader of the group spoke again. This time his visor showed a soft red light. He pointed at the tower, then at the stone in Reel's hand. Reel understood. They wanted the power, the gate, the connection between worlds. He looked at Nari. She nodded. It was time. The vines suddenly moved fast. They created a barrier around Reel and Nari. The hunters tried to push through, but the vines held firm. Reel took a deep breath. He raised the glowing stone high. The light burst out in a wide circle. The vines stretched and formed shapes, walls, shields, even a bridge. The hunters stepped back. They realized they could not take the stone by force. Reel spoke in a calm voice. This is not a weapon. It is a bridge. It connects worlds that want to be friends. The leader lowered his visor slowly. The red light faded. Nari stepped forward. She showed the star map from the device. It glowed softly in her hands. She pointed to the lines connecting Mira 7 and Earth, Unity, she said simply. The hunters looked at each other. Then the leader nodded. We seek peace, he said, but we must be careful. Reel nodded. So do we. The vines relaxed. The barrier melted away. The hunters lowered their weapons and took off their helmets. Reel saw their faces, young, curious, and full of questions. They all sat together on the soft moss. Reel and Nari told their story. How the vines trapped Nari, how Reel cut her free, and how they found the ancient tree and the device. The hunters listened closely. They shared their own stories of distant worlds and lost connections. For the first time, the jungle was full of voices, not silence. As night fell, the stars above shone brighter than before. The gate was not open yet, but now everyone knew where to find it. Reel looked at Nari. We did it, she smiled softly. Together. The jungle pulsed around them, alive with hope. The journey was far from over, but the path was clear. The morning light filtered softly through the leaves of the jungle. The air was fresh and filled with the scent of blooming flowers. Birds sang sweet songs, and the gentle rustle of the vines sounded like a calm melody. Reel and Nari stood at the edge of the clearing near the ancient tower. The other group of travelers, the hunters, sat quietly nearby. They had become friends, united by a common goal. The glowing device inside the tower still pulsed softly, a gentle rhythm like a heartbeat. It held the promise of connection, of a bridge between Mira 7 and Earth. Everyone waited for the gate to open, but first they had to prepare. Reel looked at the glowing stone in his hand. It had become a symbol of hope and trust. Nari stood close beside him, her eyes bright and full of determination. The vines around them moved gently, as if sharing their hope. We have to be ready, Nari said. The gate will open soon. We do not know what will come through. Reel nodded. We need to protect the gate. and help anyone who wants peace. One of the hunters, a young woman with curious eyes, stepped forward. She introduced herself as Lainey. She spoke of her home planet, a place very different but full of life and color. She said her people wanted to learn and share, not fight. Nari smiled. That is why we are here, to build something new. The group began to work together. They cleared paths through the jungle, marking safe ways to the tower. They built small shelters from wood and leaves. Reel showed them how to use the glowing stone to call the vines for help or protection. The jungle responded, growing stronger and safer. Days passed quickly. The group learned to live with the forest, respecting its power. The vines no longer felt like danger, but like friends. The ancient tree and the tower stood as guardians, their light shining softly. One evening, as the sun set, the device inside the tower began to glow brighter. The soft pulse turned into a steady beat. The star map on the wall lit up, showing a path between the two worlds. The vines outside the tower stretched toward the sky, forming a shimmering arch. Ril and Nari stood together beneath the arch. The air felt electric. A soft humming filled the clearing. The gate was opening. Suddenly, a light appeared in the center of the arch. It grew larger, like a window shining with stars. Through it, they could see another world, Earth. Its blue, oceans and green forests stretched out beneath a bright sky. The travelers gasped. This was the moment they had waited for. From the light, figures began to step through. They were humans, dressed in simple clothes but with friendly faces. They looked curious and amazed, just like Reel when he first met Nari. One man stepped forward. He held out his hand to Reel. "I am Kieran," he said. "We have been searching for you." Reel took Kieran's hand. "Welcome. We have much to share." Nari watched the newcomers with hope. The gate was a bridge now, not just a connection. It was a way for two worlds to come together. As the visitors entered, the jungle around the tower came alive. The vines moved gently, as if welcoming old friends home. The glowing flowers opened wider, lighting the path for new journeys. Lani turned to Nari. "This is only the beginning." Nari smiled. "Yes, a new story is starting." Ril looked at the sky, feeling the pulse of the ancient tree in his chest. The vines, the gate, the travelers, everything was connected now. Together they would build a future where different worlds could share and grow. A future where no one was trapped or alone. The gate shone bright. The jungle hummed with life. And the story of hope and unity was just beginning.